Hi, my name is Carrie Cook, and this is the Shawshank Redemption and Brokedown Palace narrated PowerPoint presentation. This is a presentation of the movie Shawshank Redemption by Frank Darabont and Brokedown Palace by Jonathan Kaplan and how they relate to The Pains of Imprisonment by Victor L. Shamas and the chapters of our textbook, Introductions of Corrections by Robert D. Hanser. The Shawshank Redemption and Brokedown Palace were chosen because they come closest to depicting what life in prison can be like, which makes them easier to relate to real-life corrections because most of us are going into this type of field. I am going to go over scenes and three characters from the Shawshank Redemption: Red, Warden Norton, and Captain Hadley, and scenes and the two main characters from Brokedown Palace, and referring how they relate to the pains of imprisonment in chapters of our textbook. The first character I will be discussing is Red from the Shawshank Redemption. For Red, the pain of imprisonment I chose was deprivation of liberty, which states that incapacitating offenders, society is protected from potential acts of harm. Shamas, 2017, page 2. Red was denied parole up until he served 40 years. Darabont, 1994, timestamp 2 hours, 8 minutes, and 23 seconds. At each sentencing hearing, he was asked if he was rehabilitated and no longer a threat to the community. I related this to Chapter 8 of our text because it tells how there should be an initial point of classification before the inmate arrives at prison, and then a reclassification should be revisited periodically. As Red gets older, he becomes less of a threat to society and less of a risk of reoffending, and he doesn't seem to be reclassified before or at any of the parole hearings. The second scene that I chose that relates to the deprivation of liberty is when Red states that for 40 years he felt the need to ask permission to take a piss. Darabont, 1994, timestamp 2 hours, 10 minutes, and 7 seconds. I related this to Chapter 16 because it talks about how prisons have a re-entry service to prepare offenders for release. Hansen, 2020, page 467. But after serving 40 years in prison, Red still has a hard time not asking for permission to use the restroom. The conclusion is that Red doesn't know how to act accordingly once paroled. Darabont, 1994, 2 hours, 10 minutes, and 7 seconds. The next character I will go over is Warden Norton from the Shawshank Redemption. The pain of imprisonment that I chose was the deprivation of security, which Shamas states that prisons can be violent, unsafe places that serve as hotbeds of crime. Shamas, 2017, page 4. Because Warden Norton had Tommy killed because he would testify that he had heard that someone else had killed Andy's wife and lover. Darabont, 1994, timestamp 1 hour, 38 minutes, and 6 seconds. I found this to be related to Chapter 7 because it refers to blind spots in correctional facilities that can occur when the design has certain areas that are obscure from easy view of security staff and/or surveillance equipment as noted. This equipment is only as effective as the security personnel who use it. Hansen, 2020, page 467. This probably made the outside area where he had Tommy shot a perfect place for it to happen. For the second example of the deprivation of security is administrative control models of inmate behaviors. Shamas, 2017, page 4. This relates to Warden Norton having Andy skimming the books. Darabont, 1994, timestamp 1 hour, 20 minutes, and 3 seconds, and relates to Chapter 15 of our textbook because it refers to one type of prison work programs, which includes types of jobs that maintain the functioning of the prison itself. Hansen, 2020, page 424. The conclusion is that Warden Norton ends up committing suicide to prevent going to prison himself. Darabont, 1994, 2 hours, 3 minutes, 51 seconds. The last character I will go over from the Shawshank Redemption is Captain Hadley. The pains of imprisonment that I used for Captain Hadley is deprivation of anatomy because it states that prisoners may lose the ability to make even the most basic decisions about their daily life, such as when and what food to eat, when and how bodily functions should be taken care of, and when and how to move within the restricted confines of the prison. Shamas, 2017, page 4. In one scene, Captain Hadley beats a new prisoner for asking when they get to eat. Darabont, 1994, timestamp 13 minutes and 53 seconds. I related this to chapter 14 because it talks about the authoritarian model. These type of managers tend to change, modify, or contort the issue into one that is consistent with their current repertoire of responses, all of which tend to be punitive in nature. Thus, this type of management stymies all sense of creative problem solving and also kills the human spirit. Hanser, 2020, page 395. In another scene, Captain Hadley beats a prisoner to death for not shutting up at night when it is his first night in prison and he is crying. Darabont, 1994, timestamp 1849. I related this to chapter 9 of our textbook because it goes over the pains of imprisonment, specifically the loss of anatomy, because the inmate is new and because he does not adhere to the quiet time to sleep. He is beaten and ends up dying. Conclusion: Captain Hadley is arrested. Darabont, 1994, 2 hours, 2 minutes, 46 seconds. The next character is Alice Marino from Brokedown Palace. The pain of imprisonment I chose for this was deprivation of heterosexual relationships. Skies believed that the loss of heterosexual relations was a profound loss for inmates. I related chapter Shamas, 2017, page 3. I related chapter 12 of our textbook to this because it talks about the impact on institutionalization on mental illness, which, like Skies stated, the loss of heterosexual relations was a profound loss for inmates and, in my opinion, could lead to depression, which is a mental illness. The second scene is when Alice, as a narrator, talks about having to get her hair cut. I linked this to chapter 1 because it relates to branding of the criminal offender. In my opinion, chopping off all of their hair was a form of branding of all the women in the prison. Hanser, 2020, page 10. Conclusion: Alice pleads guilty and agrees to serve both her and Darlene's terms. This brings me to the other main character from Brokedown Palace, Darlene Davis. The pain of imprisonment that I selected was the deprivation of goods and services, which states that the deprivation of goods and services exists when the standard of living enjoyed by inmates prior to incarceration and the policy of maintaining bare bones correctional facilities with only the most adequate level of comforts provided. Shamas, 2017, page 2. The first scene I related this to is Darlene's friends bringing a bra for her because they are not provided bras in prison. Darabont, 1994, timestamp 1 hour, 7 minutes, and 55 seconds. I related this to chapter 11 because prior to the 1800s, women were generally imprisoned in the same facilities with men. Eventually, separate women's prisons were established. Hanser, 2020, page 294 and 296. The second scene is when she is told to use a hole in the floor covered with cockroaches as a toilet. Darabont, 1994, timestamp 22 minutes, 13 seconds. I related this to chapter 4 in our textbooks because it talks about jail being short term no more than 1 year.